Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Barry Erickson, and I am Community Engagement Coordinator at Wheaton Public Library. Tonight, we are delighted to bring you another art demonstration in partnership with the DuPage Art League. Founded 63 years ago, the DuPage Art League is committed to the arts and bringing enriching programming to art lovers throughout our community. Located on Front Street in downtown Wheaton, the DuPage Art League is both a school and a gallery. They are dedicated to promoting and encouraging the visual arts through classes, workshops, gallery exhibits, and free public fine arts programs. Their classes and workshops cover a wide variety of mediums and are designed for all ages. The beautiful storefront gallery and gift shop is open to the public. We are grateful to the DuPage Art League for arranging tonight's art demonstration by acclaimed artist Marge Hall. A long-term area resident, Marge treasures family and teaching. Since 1971, she has taught and coached all levels of students at the Art League, helping them to find their own style, passion, and pace. Marge's Flower series began with a workshop with Michael Jerry in 1993 and has led to over 350 paintings. She utilizes her skill in commercial art training to concentrate on the details to render photorealistic paintings. Through this demo, she hopes to communicate her own excitement and equip you for more rewarding and joyful painting. So with that, I will turn the screen over to you, Marge. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Hi. Tonight is going to be a little different because obviously there's nobody here. It's a Zoom type meeting, but I really will like to have some questions and answers throughout the entire program. I think probably I will be talking so much and answering questions that you may have that just wait a little bit because your answers might be coming as I'm talking about what I do. So most of you, I think, are wanting to do flower paintings, and I do teach flower paintings, but I also teach landscapes, portraits, animals, whatever anybody wants to paint. It's kind of the same process. So how did I get started? As Barry said, I took a workshop in '93, and it was a duck to water. I just plain loved looking at a flower and actually executing that flower really, really large. And so by manipulating some of the colors and looking at the values, it really becomes an outstanding piece of artwork if you can do all of that. So what do I start with? I start with my cell phone. My cell phone, I used to have a 35mm camera, and then I went to a Nikon, and now this is the thing that's in my purse all the time. So I take my photographs from my cell phone. You see this little button on the back? That's a lifesaver too, because when I'm holding a flower in my hand, I need to take my pictures. So I use my thumb and to take photos. Sometimes I look down, take a picture. I'm turning that flower to get the shadows where I want them. I might put a flower up towards the sky, take a photo. I might put it, there's some dark bushes over there. I'll take a photo. I may take 40 photos of this one little flower and then get inside, look at all what I've taken, and then delete, delete, delete. And out of 40, I might get 3 that I really, really like. So that's where I start. So now, how do I get that onto the canvas? If it's a simple, simple flower, like a tulip or like a calla lily or something that I can paint really, really, something like this, that's a simple design, right? And so I would just take the canvas, brush, put a little bit of paint on it, and simply draw it onto the canvas. Once I get the image on there, then it's a matter of, am I working with a dark background, a light background? Well, if I'm working with a flower that has some really, really dark shadows, I will take and actually, here's an example. Here's the flower. You see how that shadow on the bottom is very, very dark. And so if this background were white, there would be no way that I would put that darkness in there. So I look at the flower and say, okay, that is about one value darker than the black. So now I start with these shadows that are the right value. The temperature of some of the shadows can go from very, very warm, which is this brownish, to very cool, which is more into the blue shades. So once I get that started, then my next petal is going to be, okay, what is that color and value in comparison to this bottom petal? Okay. Now you say, did I draw out these lines by sketching it? Sometimes I do, and sometimes I use a projector. Now, I would never have thought of a projector, but when Michael Jerry did his class, his workshop, he said, okay, use this projector because it's very hard for us to take a small flower and enlarge it. Our brains don't want to do that. So I was like, that's cheating. There's no way I'm going to do that. But I found out that if you just have this outline, it's so much easier to get the inners from that outline, because now you've established the big shape on the canvas. So if you want to paint, I'm teaching painting a flower, not drawing the flower as much. So you can do a grid type thing if that's easier for you. If you don't have a projector, that's fine. It's just going to take you longer to get those lines onto the canvas. The canvases that I use are just from DuPage. They're pre-gessoed, and they come in different types. The premium one has a little bit of a wood that goes around, and I kind of like that because it's bellowed a little bit so that you don't get any type of wood when you press down and paint. You don't get that wood making a little bit of a line. So that's what I kind of have been using if I'm going to go get a canvas. My palette, I use a disposable one. And this one I brought just to show you. It's the actual containers from Target. And I actually put a cork on it, screwed it on the top, so that when I did put it in my bag, it doesn't flop forward. Well, you can see some of it does because the top is kind of dirty and full of paint. But also I put a little tab of duct tape on the side so I can pull this out. Sometimes it gets stuck down in there. So if you put a little duct tape on there, you can take your palette out. Now, see how messy this is? If I'm going to paint, I don't want that messy, messy palette. So I can just take this paper palette and rip it across. And now I have a clean palette. So that's what I wanted to show you. I don't take time to clean. I leave my paints at the top, and then I have a nice clean palette to work whatever I need. So these disposables come in the small size or the large size. And if you don't have a big freezer, I also put this in my freezer, and then my paints are pretty good for the next day or whenever I need to paint, because it's just like anything else that's frozen. Once it thaws out, it's just fine. And it doesn't take that long to thaw out. I know there are some people that say never put your paints in the freezer. And I'm just telling you what I do, because so many artists do different things. And tonight I'm just going to show you what's worked for me. And this is what's worked for me, because I don't really want to take the time to clean up and do all this stuff. So to me, this works good. And it's a small thing that I think most people can just stick in their freezer. The bigger palette is one that you can get from DuPage, or I'm not sure if they have them in other places, but again, it's the same type of palette that it's a disposable with paper. And I just put my paints out the same way almost every single time, starting with white to yellows to reds to blues, a little bit of green and some black. And I use these colors almost every single time that I paint. If I'm doing a purple flower, I might put out some purple oxide, or if I'm doing an orange flower, I might put out some cad orange. But normally this is my palette. And again, I didn't clean it all out, but you'll see I mixed up a couple colors because that's what I'm going to be working on tonight. So I think we're just going to get started painting, and then I can answer more questions as I'm painting. I'm using mineral spirits. deodorized mineral spirits for my, clean out my brushes. And then sometimes if you have a little bit of linseed oil and mineral spirits, you can make a medium that if I want to make my paint a little bit more liquidy, I can make it. And these little jars, I don't know if anybody gets the Fiji cheese things with the, I think this was a little jelly jar that it comes with. So any type of little jars that you have are kind of neat to put your medium in if you want. The other thing, if you want, your tuna fish can is a great thing that you can toss out. And this particular thing is for tuna fish, that if you have a can with oil and you want to get it out, you press it and dump it. Well, it really makes a nice thing for your brushes. It's a little bit of a grid on here, so you can take your brush, put your mineral spirits in here, and now you've got an inexpensive $1 thing to wipe your brushes off, and the sediment goes to the bottom most of the time. And now you've got a nice place to clean your brushes. Tonight I just used the mineral spirits here, so I wasn't going to fill that up. Okay, so when you take your photographs, like I said, that's probably the most important thing, because you're really trying to look for the light. That's what I'm looking for. So if you can get your flowers to have a lot of shadows in them, lights and darks, and have an interesting pattern going on with that, that's probably the one thing that I look for. So in this particular tulip, as you see, it is actually an open tulip. And so there are some lights and darks in this. And that's what I really am wanting to do tonight. So I already have sketched it out, and I use a watercolor colored pencil. And then when I put the moisture from the paint onto the canvas, the actual color of the pencil dissolves, and I don't have any lead. So if I'm doing a yellow type of flower, I use like a yellow ochre type of a pencil. If I'm doing a pink one, I use pink. As you see, it's kind of pinkish. If I'm doing a purple, I use a purple pencil. And that keeps that almost dirty feel of the pencil out of the flower. I do like a white canvas I start off with. I don't have the gray canvases or the black or whatever, because somebody said, oh, is your canvas black to begin with? And no. I like the white of the canvas to show through. I think the colors get bright when I'm painting. So if you're asking about what colors I'm using, I'm actually just taking what I have here, and I'm going to start by putting a little bit of color onto the brush. Now, the brushes, what do I use? I use really, really cheap brushes from Walmart or Hobby Lobby or any of them. I'm liking these because they're soft. They have a little bit of resistance to them. And when they get to look like palm trees, I can just throw them out. They're like maybe 50 cents to 75 cents a piece. So I really don't use expensive brushes at all. I just like the feel of those. If I'm doing a landscape, I might use a different brush, a bristle, because then you're poking at it and scrubbing. But this, I'm a gentle person with it. So I start usually from the left-hand side of the painting, because I don't want to get my hand in it. And that's the only reason. And I can turn this in any direction I want, obviously. But I thought maybe tonight I would start by this section, and then just go from one section to the other and show you how much paint I put on it. I really use thinner paint for my first coat. And by taking a little bit of this thin coat, I can actually layer it and then go back and layer some more. Now, if I get the wrong color, obviously I can put another color on top of it. And I'm going to try and figure out what the value is of the lights and the darks, and use a brush work that blends a little bit. As you see, a little bit of blending there. And I sometimes just use one brush to have the entire painting going. I don't wash out my brush all that much. So now the other trick that I think is really the best trick is to take a piece of, where did I put that piece of paper? of paper with holes in it. And oops, here it is underneath. When people are asking me, how do I get the right colors? If you have a piece of paper and you just simply make a hole in it and you put it over the place where you are painting, now the white is actually taking away from what color am I making, because you look at a color sometimes and you relate it to another one that's next to it. So if I take this and I put this color next to it, you see I'm not dark enough, am I? So then I would go back and I would add a little bit more color to that to make it deeper. So you can see I can get it pretty much the right color there. So now I am at the right color. This will save you, I don't know how much time to do it this way, because then you are going to get the right value and the right color almost immediately. And this will work with doing, if you have a photograph, this will work with portraits, with anything that you're doing, if you are trying to copy the actual color that you're seeing. So this is a cooler red. And again, you see it's fairly thin as I'm putting it on here. Now I usually, what I call this, blocking in the color. And when I block in this color, then later on, I may come back and look at it and say, it needs to be warmer in this section. It needs to be cooler in this section. It's not as dark here as I thought it was. It maybe could be a touch lighter over here. So I totally keep looking at the paint and the colors and determine what I want to add to it to make it the right color or the right value. Value is simply just lightness or darkness. So again, usually it takes me a long time to finish one of these flowers. I can work 30 to 60 hours on one. So it's not a quick fix, but for me, I just love the way that it just all comes together at the end. So again, these little old brushes that are at an angle, and I really just tried them and thought, oh, I think that works. So I just went ahead and now I'm using them pretty much. And like I said, you can go to Walmart and pick them up. There's a packet here. This is what they look like. And, you know, they come 4 in a package for maybe $5 or something. So it's very, very inexpensive to paint with those. So now we get down into the area. Oh, and the other thing I do is I take my thumb and I put it where I'm painting, because a lot of times, especially if I have a flower that is really, really complicated, that's hard to to keep track of which petal you're on. So this way I can actually see where I'm going with this and put that finger there saying, oh, okay, that's a little bit darker. That's a little bit cooler. I'm gonna add a little bit of that color and know that that's gonna be at least correct. Now, sometimes too, your lighting in your house might be different. Painting outside or painting in your studio might be different than painting in the kitchen. So your light kind of casts what you're going to paint in a different light. So you can have a problem sometimes with painting outside and then trying to paint inside and going, oh, how come it doesn't look like it's the same color? So just be aware of that. And usually I do my painting for these demos that I do outdoor shows. I do them outside. And then when I get home, I finish up and do all of the other work that needs to be a little bit more tedious
And sometimes the lighting is just not very good or the same from being inside or being outside. Now there's white, but it really isn't white because look at how it's in the shadow. But if I can kind of pull this in, I know that that color is that darkness. So I'm going to just simply keep putting that color in there, even though you're going to say, oh, that doesn't look like it's the right color. Is it really that dark? Well, it is in the shadow. So I'm thinking that if you squint your eyes, it is the same value as the red. And so as I'm putting this in, I'm squinting my eyes and saying, yeah, that probably these two values are the same. And that's what I'm kind of seeing in this flower. Okay. So I would go back to this petal because I don't want to have my hand in the wet paint. If you've noticed, I actually stabilized my hand by putting my little pinky finger there, and then I can use these two fingers to paint, and it doesn't wobble because sometimes you start doing this and your hand gets all wobbly. So the colors I'm using are the ones that I normally have every single time on my palette. I have a warm and a cool of each of the actual primary colors. So see that when I put it up there, that was too purplish and I needed it more red. So I come with a little bit of cadmium. Now that needs to be a little bit lighter. So I can take my white and put, whoops, that's still pink. Put a little bit of that lightness over here. And is that light? Yeah, it's that light at least. So I am going to put that color right here. Then it's going to go into a little bit more of a reddish color. So I'm going to take a little bit of my permanent red rose and cadmium red and make that a little bit darker as it goes into this section. Okay, that seems fairly decent.
Would you reference a lighter picture you're painting?
Okay.
Because they can't see.
What I'm
Yeah.
looking at.
Yeah.
Got it.
Well, not all the time, but one time
Mhm.
when you're talking about,
Good idea. Good idea.
see, we should be able to put that both.
So sometimes your colors aren't exactly the same, and that's why I go back and I do a little bit more adjusting later. Because if I can't get the right colors right off the bat, then sometimes you just have to say, okay, I know that that's a little bit darker. I know that that's a little bit more blue in it. And just the more you paint, the more you're going to get the correct colors. So I see a little bit more of a purplish there. You can always come back and put another color on top. That's what's oil paintings are pretty forgiving. You know, with watercolors, you put it on that paper and it soaks it up. And sometimes it's really, really hard to change it. But if you're working in oils, a lot of times you can really, really change the color, change the shapes, get a little bit difference going. Right now I'm thinking, oh yeah, that needs to be darker up here. But my first reaction for tonight is that I am going to try and fill in all of this color and get rid of the white. Because once I get rid of the white, then I can adjust my colors to know in relationship to the other colors, what it needs. Does it need to be darker? Does it need to be lighter? Does it need to be grayer? So it's all going to work together as far as how I'm painting this and what I need to do to enhance all the petals. So being in commercial art, the one thing we all had to do was obviously to follow the photographs and put down what we were seeing. And so I really think that that's what kind of got me into this particular mode of painting so realistically. And really, I'm enthralled with so many of the different flowers. There's so many different shapes, and they're exciting to paint one after the other. There's nothing like a real thinness of maybe an orchid or an iris. And the more that you look at these flowers, it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous thing that you can see the difference in all the petals and all of the nuances that are making it look wonderful. So I just think it's kind of neat to photograph the flowers and to get them to look like they're almost three-dimensional. And this is how I would keep going around and around. And you see, normally there's not that much difference in some of these lines that I put. I'm not really giving myself a whole bunch of lines that I'm looking at to paint the shapes. If I'm just kind of adding up some of these here and looking at my photograph just to kind of copy and relate one color and one shape to another. That's what I'm trying to do. And I haven't put much mineral spirits or anything else in the paints themselves. I'm using permanent red rose and a little bit of cad to make some of the reds going. So if you see some of this is a little bit more on the cooler red side, and then some are a little bit warmer. When I say cooler, it's more towards the pink. And then if it's warmer, it's more towards the orange. And there's a little bit of each. So I might have to go back and add a little bit more of the cooler up in this area, and then maybe a little bit darker towards that area. But again, this is all kind of, let's get the whole thing in and then adjust it to which colors are working and which ones aren't. I am washing out my brush because I'm going to the white. And a lot of times I only use one brush. Probably should be using more than one. I could have one with my whites and another one with my pinks. And normally I would have my paints to the right side of me. And because of filming this, I thought it might be easier for you to see my brush strokes and how I'm applying this if the paints were down here in front of me. So that's one of the reasons why it is down in front of me, so that we can actually see how I'm mixing some of the colors on here. And this palette was, it's full of different colors in that because I was using it for another type of flower. But for right now, you see that I'm just using a touch of this and a touch of that to make some of these colors, the grays, and getting a little bit towards the side here. It's a little bit darker, so I can blend that darkness into the edge there a little bit. Okay, and since I've got it on my brush, I'm going to go over here and do the same thing with this edge. Okay, now I'm going to go up back into here and maybe get a touch more of this darker white, because it is in this section that it's getting a little bit deeper. And I want that white to be whiter, so I might take another brush, because that way I don't have to wash this out so much. So if I had some white right here, and that's this section, and that comes down into here, and then there's a shadow that comes down into this section. Okay. Now, blending wise, if I have this brush and I have two wet type areas, I can actually do a nice little blend with the brush so that I have a softer edge. You see how it's kind of one working into the other. So now I'm getting a little bit of a softer feel for some of this coming down into this edge. And here we have, okay, there's that one, then this goes here. And really, you've got to pay attention to where all these shadows come and which ones are the positive and which ones are the negative. And that's why a lot of times I will be holding this in my hand so I can tell the difference between where all of these things are going. I think that was white. So if you make a mistake, you can just paint right over it. And I think that's supposed to be white right here in between the two darker things. And that's what I'm going to do now. Did any of you watch the Bob Ross show the other night? I put it on, and it was amazing that he did an actual painting in 26 minutes. So I'm going, okay, I don't know how he does it, but he had the whole canvas that was totally white, and then he comes in with these huge brushes. So it was an interesting movie. I'm glad I watched it, but it was totally different than my way of doing it. So, you know, art is one of those subjective things that everybody has their own way of doing things. And I have found this works for me. So if you say, but that is crazy, I don't think I'd ever do it that way, that might be just right, because for you, it may not be the right way of doing it. So I am just saying, this is something that I have discovered myself, that if I do it this way, it works for me. So all of you, you know, I think you could watch probably 10 YouTube things on painting, and you might get 5, maybe even 10 different people telling you to do something different. So I think you just have to do it yourself and find out what works for you, because every artist has a different way of probably attacking something, and it would be terrible if we all did it the same. So that's why I think, again, I'm using these brushes that somebody might say, oh my word, those are so cheap. How in the heck does she paint with those? But some way I like the feel of them. So, you know, you just have to work with what you have.
Marge, if I can interrupt for just a moment, someone is asking, the next time you're going to be mixing maybe some of those reds or whites on the palette, maybe if we can back up enough so that we can see both how you're mixing the paint and then choosing, you know, where and how to apply it. So you know, we're so spoiled with Zoom and being able to see up close. You know, we're hoping to see everything. So like I said, the next time you're mixing, maybe we can back out a little bit and see both the palette and the painting.
Okay, my tech people. It's just a couple of puddles and I'm adding to it. And if I feel like it's darker, then I go with a little bit deeper colors. If I feel like it's lighter, I might mix a little white in there with it. So right now I'm doing a touch of a little bit of the deeper down in the corner. And then too, if I have a brush with a little bit of white on it, I can actually add some of these veins at this point, just to get a little bit of a line going in here. A little bit of a line going in here.
Marge, yes, and when you go down to mix, don't mix so fast. We
Oh.
get down there and you're gone already. Do it again.
Okay, don't mix so fast is what she said. Okay, so I'm trying to get this painting done in one night. So if I go in the white and then I go into some of the other colors, I have a cad red here and a permanent red rose. Now, and it could be the phthalo red rose. I'm not sure because this has been squeezed out for a while. I added this pink color to my palette because when you talk about phthalo, phthalo red rose, phthalo green, phthalo blue, any of the phthalos, they are strong, strong, and they will hold their own. So if you take a little bit of this phthalo and add white to it, it's going to be a nice, strong, bright, reddish pink color. If it's too cold, which is more on the purpley pink side, then if you add a touch of the red into it, you can knock it down and it becomes more of a in-between color. It's not quite pink and it's not quite red. And that's what I'm seeing in this tulip. In some of these areas, I'm seeing a little bit more of that color kind of coming through. So that's the colors that I'm using. I do use a phthalo green every once in a while, and everybody says, oh, that's horrible, I can't work with it. Well, it is a terrible color. But if you mix it with a little black, if you mix it with a little yellow, it's a very, very rich color. And sometimes that's what I use for my background colors. If I don't want to go totally black, I can use that, and it's a rich color. So if you can lasso these phthalo colors, they're gorgeous to work with, but they can take over too. So my phthalo blue, instead of ceruleum, if I actually have, this is the phthalo blue, if I take white and actually put a little bit of that phthalo blue in there, you are going to get like a ceruleum. You see a beautiful color, and it's very strong. So now if I'm saying, I still want that a little bit lighter, you can keep going with your white or start with your white and then add a touch to that. But that makes a gorgeous sky. And then the other blue that I have is my French ultramarine, which is a little bit more on the purple side. Do you see that? So if you say, okay, how about cobalt? What about cobalt? Well, cobalt to me is the mixture of both of these. So if I take a little bit of this and a little bit of that, that is my cobalt in between. So I have learned that by just putting out these, 6 or 8 colors, I can mix almost anything. And I think if you have a lot of colors, mixing your colors gets a little bit more complicated because you didn't remember if you put it in this one or that one. And if you have 24 colors out there, how do you know which one you actually used? So the trick with the little circle and putting it on top of your painting, mixing the color and putting it next to it, to me is gonna save you so much time in mixing. You know, when we have reds and stuff like that, those are the easy colors to mix. But when you get to the really, really subtle colors, the ones that aren't pink, they aren't red, you don't know what they are, like that color. What is that color? I don't know. It's a mixture, so you get the depth first, and then you go and you say, is that cooler? Is that warmer? What is that in comparison to the rest of it? So I hope that helps you understand as far as some of the mixing type things. And usually you can get pretty much, if you're using these colors and you know that you want to darken the red, well, what can I put in it to darken it? You can darken it with blue. You can darken it with alizarin crimson because that's just a dark version of a red. But then is it the right color? So again, you put it up there and you say, ooh, that looks a little bit too purple. That looks a little bit whatever it is that you're seeing. And then you can go back and you can adjust it and say, I think that needs a little bit more red on top of this because right now it's too purple. So you can just adjust over the top of it. And then it might come out correct. If it doesn't, try something else. If it needs more of an orangey color, even though it's in shadow, it might be dark, but it might still be warm because it's reflecting some kind of color, and instead of just being a really big blob of color. Now, maybe I have this a little bit too dark, or maybe that's not dark enough. So again, I keep adjusting these. And if I'm just concerned now about covering the canvas, I may just go on and say, I'll come back to that later on. I don't have to finish this right now. Or I can say, you know, I think if I added just a touch more of the lighter color, that may help me make this shadow just jump out a little bit more. And maybe that's all I need is just a touch more of the light next to that dark. And now that pops out a little bit more. So it's a matter of, again, going back and forth and saying, do I need a little bit of light? Do I need a little bit of dark? How am I going to make that flower pop? How am I going to make that pink pop? Is that a nice light area coming down and blending? See these nice soft brushes that I have, these cheap, nice soft brushes that I have, they do blend beautifully. So I can go back in with just a little bit of that white and do a nice blend right there. And that's all I needed. So now let's go back and see what these shadowy type colors are, because that might trick me up here. So, and I wear contacts. And so the one eye is for close up and the other one is for distance. And this is kind of in the middle. So if I lean in, it's because I'm trying to get my one eye to see what I'm doing. So I'm going to go back and see some of this shadow color. And I would not be using the phthalo for that because it's too strong. So if I'm going to cool down this color in here, because that's pretty warm. And as it gets out here, it gets just a touch cooler. And I put just a hair of the bluish ultramarine into it. And then that seems to cool it down just a touch. So that's what I am using in this gray area here. And again, I see some of these things coming down. I have to make sure that I'm in the right spot. And that goes here. There's a little bit coming down into this section. Let's see. That's off of this. This is off of here. And that's why I hold it in my hand so that I can kind of see where it's going. So let me do that for just a touch so I know I'm getting the right shapes in here. Yep, that goes down into here. Now your shadows too have fuzzier edges sometimes. They're not quite as stiff. So if we go in and make them just a touch softer on the edges, that sometimes works better too. And a lot of times I don't do a lot of the details at this point. I get what they call, I'm blocking in first. And then after I block in my shapes, then I come back and do a lot more of the actual things that need to be emphasized. So I normally wouldn't put all the strokes in here. I'd leave those until after I get my main shapes in. But I'm putting a couple of them in tonight. Okay.
Marge, a few minutes ago, you mentioned the background, and someone was asking about the black background that you have there. Would you describe how you do that and what material you use?
It's just black paint. And I simply take the photograph, enlarge it on there, and then just to do the outline edge, I use lamp black usually.
And that's oil as well?
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
Thank you.
And a lot of times if I'm in a hurry or I'm doing an art show and I really don't want to spend a lot of time on the background before I do the flowers, you will see a lot of the brush strokes. And then I go back and actually make it better as far as I might put 2 or 3 coats of that black on to make sure that it gets to a nice flat black. And then when you're done, there might be some edges that you painted that aren't sharp. And so you want to go back and sharpen those edges too a little bit more. So it's just a lamp black, nothing exciting, just a little bit of black. Okay, this actually was dark in this section. Okay. So sometimes I paint and I'm going, okay, where did I end up? Where did I end up? And that's again, my finger is here. So that I can definitely see where I'm going with some of these colors. I don't like this brush. I put it out there. Okay, the reason I don't like this brush, see how long it is? I call it a wimpy brush because it's kind of, it's not stiff enough for me. It's, so I open up packages sometimes. When you go to the store and you get a package, sometimes on the bottom, you can kind of open it up and take the brush out and then put it on your hand and press down. If it goes, don't buy it, because you need a little bit of resistance. And that's what I love. This one doesn't have enough resistance. I'm going to use it, but it's wiggly and I don't like it. But you can see it's doesn't have enough push to it. I'm not going to use it. So your brushes, like I said, I like these because they work for me. Now, if somebody else likes a different type of brush, please, just use that. There's no magic as far as, what you're using. Somebody said one time, oh, if I could just get the same golf clubs as Tiger Woods, I would just play a better game of golf. And I'm thinking the same thing with paints and brushes. You don't. It's the person using the brushes that actually makes the painting. So will I like certain brushes? Yeah, you just saw, I didn't like that one at all. It was wimpy. So I'm using the brush that I like. And it is just one of these El Cheapos, but it pushes nicely. And I can blend and get some strokes in here.
While we're talking about materials, someone is asking, do you have a particular brand of paint that you prefer?
Well, I brought this because somebody moved to California and they gave me tons of this paint in these big, big tubes. And so being a tightwad, I have been using them and I have been thinking they're just fine. Now, I don't know if it's called student grade or not, but it works for me. I did use a lot of Utrecht paint and I like that. It seemed to be a little bit more juicy. What I call, it was just a little bit less sticky. So the Utrecht paints, I would say, if you're going to buy something, they're kind of good. But, again, there's so many different brands. Get what you can afford. And if you are a student and you're just starting out, you might just buy something that is inexpensive. And then later on, when you really feel like, yeah, I really want to do this, then you go to maybe a little bit more expensive or less student grade. But I really think that you can mix and match, and I'm not really into, you have to have a certain brand. They used to have Shiva paint. Oh, and I didn't like that at all. That one had so much linseed oil in it that I called it the slippery paint because it was almost like it was slipping off the canvas. So that is one of them that I really didn't like to use. But other than that, I think there's just really so many brands out there. Now, if you've never painted in oils, the only other thing I can suggest is that down here at the league, there is a supply type thing that they will let you actually use a set of oil paints if you wanted to come to class. And then you can try out the paints. The other thing is, I don't know if some of you have heard about the oil paints that are water-based. Some people have allergies to mineral spirits, and that's terrible. So you can't use any kind of turpentine or mineral spirits if you're gonna paint with oils. So they use the water-based oil paints. Now, when they first came out, I went, that's ludicrous. How can you mix oil and oil together? But the people who are using them. And in fact, wasn't the portrait painter in the last demo, didn't he use water-based oil paints? I think he did.
I don't remember.
And the only thing that I really don't think they do as well is when you freeze them, they become a little bit what I call sticky. And so you really don't freeze very well, but that's the only difference as far as putting this paint onto the canvas. They work pretty good. So if you're trying different things and you say, oh, there's no way I'm gonna paint with oils because they smell. Well, yeah, a little bit. I kind of like the smell of them, but some people can't take that smell. And so if you wanted to try the water-based oil paints, that would work too. The other thing you can do if you don't want to invest in the paints, buy one tube of black and one tube of white and do a value study. And that way you'll feel how you can maneuver the paint a little bit without investing a lot of money into it. And who was it that was one of the teachers that said she could paint only, her dad was teaching her and he would not allow her to do anything in color until a year or two of doing value studies. That was a little bit over the edge, but that's how she learned to do beautiful paintings, because she had so much value study. So I'm thinking if you wanted to try even a flower, I mean, to me, the nuances are in the colors themselves, but if you wanted to just see how the oil paint pushes around your canvas, doing something in black and white could be something that you might want to at least try. And so now even the mineral spirits that I get a big gallon from Menards and use that, the deodorized paint thinner or mineral spirits or something that has no smell. So you don't have to buy, you know, the terpenoid and all that. If you want to, that's fine. If you're sensitive, you might have to buy that. So everybody's different, and this is what's working for me right now. So that's what I am using.
Marge, we've been talking quite a bit about paint. Could you mentioned that you really only use limited colors, and someone is asking, could you go over again the colors that are on your palette, and maybe at some point we could take another look at that?
Sure. So the primary colors are ones you can't make. You can't make yellow, you can't make red, and you can't make blue. And that's why they're called primary colors. And so I have what they call a warm and a cool of those particular colors. So I start usually with white, and I use titanium white. And there's a ton of different whites too, but that's the one I have been using. And then next to it, I have my lemon yellow. So I start with my lightest value. And that to me is a color that, again, you can't, I don't use it that much, but when you need it, you need it. If I wanted to make a yellow that's a little bit more warm, I could add just a hair of my cad red into my lemon. So if you only had one lemon, one yellow to use, I would say use your lemon, because you can always warm that up, but you can't cool down the cadmium. Okay, so I have a lemon and then I have a cadmium. Some of the cadmiums are cadmium dark, cadmium light. There's a ton of different. You want one just to look a little bit warmer, more on the reddish side than your lemon. Okay, next to my cadmium yellow, I have cadmium red. These two mixed together make my purest orange, and that's why they're next to each other. And then I like this phthalo red rose, permanent rose, any of those rose colors. Most of them are pretty much the same. I don't know which one is cheaper or more expensive, but whatever it is, that's in between my alizarin crimson and my cad is my pinky permanent rose. And that's the only one that I have 3 reds, as you see. So now I've made my orange with my cadmium red and my cadmium yellow. So what am I going to do to make purple? Because we know that purple is a secondary color. If I use my alizarin crimson and my ultramarine blue, they are next to each other. They make the purest purple. Why? Because neither one of them have yellow in it. Alizarin crimson has got a bluish, and then my French ultramarine is a reddish blue. So neither one of them have yellow in it. So that's how I make purple. Now I get over here to this phthalo blue. And if I had this in a circle, this lemon yellow would be next to my phthalo blue. And that is going to give me my purest, brightest green, because neither one of these have red in it. So it is going to give me a strong, strong green. If I wanted a khaki green, I would go with more of the phthalo, ultramarine blue and the cadmium, because both of those have red. So you all maybe know about complementary colors, and it's simple, but yet people who go out and buy these charts and go, oh, well, this color's opposite of this one and this one's, and so that must be the complement, and what do they do and all this good stuff. Well, if you have 3 fingers, and I do this to all my students all the time, you have 3 fingers, you have yellow, you have red, and you have blue. What is a complementary color? A complementary color, if it's next to the 2 of them next to each other, they enhance. If it's in, it's going to dull it down. So I have, let's say I'm working with red. What are the other 2 colors? Yellow and blue. What do yellow and blue make? Green. So what is the complement of red? Green. Okay. If I have a red apple and I want it to get darker and I want it to get duller, I could add a little bit of green into that red and knock it down a little bit. If I take that green and put it next to that apple red, it's going to pop it a little bit. So using complementary colors, then it's going to either enhance or dull. Now we have this yellow over here, and yellow is a wimp. I mean, anytime you work with yellow, if you put blue into it, it turns green. If you put red into it, it turns orange. So how do you make yellow dark? Well, what's the complement of yellow? What's red and blue together? Purple. So the complement of yellow is purple. So if you put a reddish purple in, your darks for your yellow are going to be a little bit warmer, more on the brown side. If you put a bluish purple into your yellow, it's going to be a little bit more on the greenish side. But you can eventually get those yellows to be a little bit deeper by putting in some of these purple colors into the yellow. So that's the complement. And really, 3 fingers, you're going to remember that. Yellow, red, blue. If I have blue, what's the complement? Red and yellow make orange. So that's the complement of blue. So you don't have to buy that big color wheel and try to figure out all these different things, okay? And it really works, because if you're dulling something, you're working with this blue sky, or you're working with the greens in a landscape, and you want them to subdue a little bit. Well, you say, oh, it's too bright, it's coming forward. How do I dull it down? You think green. Ooh, what's the complement of green? Red. Oh, maybe if I put a little bit red in there, it'll knock it down. So that's the difference of the complementary colors. So my palette, and I do have black. My last one, phthalo green and black. Now, phthalo green is a killer. If you put white with it, yeah, so if you come down here and I'll show you what actually happens with phthalo green. If you take white and you add that phthalo green, that's not green. I mean, that is not a outside tree green, is it? Yuck. So how do I knock that down? Let's take a little bit of my red put it in there. Now I've got kind of a khaki green. It's really like a muddy color, but let's put a touch more of the yellow in there to make it wonderful, rich green, okay? If I actually wanted to take, black and yellow make green too. So if I take a little bit of black, maybe a touch of yellow, I can kind of make this green darker by adding those two colors. Now, color theory and working with colors, to some people, it's the hardest thing that they're doing when they're painting. And here you go with this little thing here and this little circle. Because if you're really trying to match some kind of a color, just playing with this, saying, oh, that's too dark. Oh, maybe if I add white. Well, if I add white, it's gonna look chalky because white and black make gray. So look at, I'm chalking that down. Oh dear, that wasn't right. Well, what would I add to that to not make it look chalky? Well, how about a little yellow? Because that's going to pull up the green part of this. Oh, that's much better. So by working down here and making your colors, you don't have that many to work with. And eventually a couple here and a couple there, and you'll get the right colors. I hope that helps for color mixing, because I wasn't going to go into too much of the color theory type stuff.
So you don't use a palette knife to mix it all, you just mix with your
I
brush?
don't. I just mix it with a brush. And in fact, I actually mix these ahead of time, just thinking, well, that'll save me some time. But normally I just put my brush in, and just mix and put it up, mix and put it up. So I'm always kind of going with just one little brush and mixing as I go. Yeah.
While we're talking about mixing colors, do you want to venture into brown?
Oh, okay. I don't put brown on my palette unless I'm doing outdoors. When you're working outside, sometimes you need a little bit of browns. So if I did, it's probably some kind of an umber that I would use. Burnt sienna is a little bit on the red side to me. Now, if you want to make brown, how do you make brown? I mean, that's easy. You take your blue, you take all your primaries, and you take your red, and you take your yellow. Oops, too much red. And what do you have? Brown. So depending on if you want a cool brown or a warm brown, does everybody see that is a brown? I put a little bit of white in it just so you can see it is brown, brown, brown. And again, there's not many brown flowers, obviously, so I don't use brown on my palette that much. But if I am using the purples, sometimes when you're making a purple, they're not as bright as a purple that you can buy from the store. Dioxide purple is a beautiful purple. And so if you're painting a purple flower, I might add that to my palette just because then I don't have to mix. Does that answer most questions here? Okay.
That's
So-
great. Thank you.
So do we want to take a break and look at some of the slideshow that I brought?
Sure, let me go ahead and do that now.
Okay.
Okay, I think we are seeing your first slide now. Go right ahead.
Okay, so I tried to do different canvases. This is an actual 36 by 36 inch round canvas, and it comes already stretched like this. There's wood around the outside, and it was just an interesting composition. And you see that there is a bowl of water, and so a lot of people say, how do you paint glass? And that's just one of the things that you just look at what color it's reflecting, and it turns out to be glass. So that's a round one. Next. I also turn my square canvases diagonally so that the point is up in the top. And this is a spider mum. And again, I'm just trying to be a little bit different with the different shapes that you can use with the canvas. And this is a shape that I have come up with that I think looks pretty neat with being on the wall. And like a 24 inch by 24, when you actually make it diamond shape from the two side points to the other side point, it's actually bigger. So you're painting seems bigger on the wall. Next. Backgrounds. I don't know if anybody's Swedish, but yellow and blue are Swedish colors. And somehow when I was painting this flower, I thought, oh, I'll bet you a nice blue background might be interesting to paint with its yellow flower. So that's why I put a different background on this. And most of the time, if it's a square painting, I can hang it the diamond shape. So I put the wire across it, then put a little bit of a wire up at the top so it can be hung both ways, because my mother would just be insane. She never liked anything that was crooked. And so when I started doing these diamond shapes, she wanted to make them all straight on the wall. So when I do paint these, I do put the two different types of wires so that you can hang them diamond shape wise or straight across. Next. Backgrounds. Again, this mum that I was painting, I looked at the shadow and I thought, what an interesting pattern that had. And so why not use that in the painting itself? So I took this as a whole and felt that the flower and the shadow were better together. And that's just a white painted background, cream color, whatever it was. So it's a lighter background and a dark flower. Next. Sunlight. Again, remember when I said I take these pictures and have the sunlight come from behind? Well, I normally don't use anybody else's flowers, but a student came up and said her daughter had taken this photograph and she loved it. And so would I paint it? Well, I ended up doing a 24 by 36 inch canvas, very big, and she did end up buying it, but it was her photograph of her flowers. So it was a very different thing that I did, because I normally only use my photographs of my flowers. So that's another example of maybe if somebody has a wonderful photograph that you can use it too for your own purposes. Next. This is sunlight coming through, and petunias. Who would have thunk that a petunia would have such nice texture in it? But they have lots of little wrinkles in that, and the light coming from behind glowing through the center is one of the things that I thought was interesting about this particular flower. Next. Iris. When somebody said, what is the most fascinating flower to paint? My thought really went right away to an iris. It is not round. It doesn't have all these petals that are sunk in the middle. It has a very, very delicate, soft shape that sometimes if you look like you can blow on it, it will wiggle. So it's very, very interesting to paint those edges so that it looks like a nice thin petal. And of course, again, the light is coming. So I'm trying to capture that sense of light coming from the center. Next. Sometimes you get a flower that has umpty petals on it. And that's when you say, okay, I think I'm going to project this one, because it's just a ton of different petals. So that one was projected, but doing the center of some of these gets complicated too. So you can spend, 12 hours just working on the center part of some of the flowers. So that's why I chose this one to show you, because it really is an intricate type of flower. Next. I sometimes hone in on the center of the flowers. And this is a 24 by 36 painting that I just loved the lights and darks. Again, it's almost like a value study. Excuse me. So that's why I painted that one, because I thought that was going to be a nice study, almost a black and white. Next. These are 3 actual paintings side by side. I should have probably moved them a little bit further apart so you could see that there are 3 actual tulip flowers. But again, a triptych type thing, hung together, made it a very nice long, I think they are each 12 inches long. So that was another way of painting flowers, that you don't have to have one big canvas. You can do several and put them together. Next. Oh, now, this is almost what I would consider plein air, because I went to somebody's house. Grace Averdy was a neighbor of mine, and she says, from New York, Marge, you're gonna come up, I've got this nice still life, you wanna paint it with me? So I went, oh, sure. Went up there, and in one setting, we painted this painting. And it's a fairly large, a 20 by 24, maybe 18 by 24. Excuse me. And so she was on the phone and talking to people, and she never did get hers finished, but I went to her house, so I didn't have any interruptions. And you can kind of see that the flowers are not very, very detailed. They're freer because I did them within, 3 hours. So it's a still life of flowers. So with that, I think maybe we won't go to the next slide, because then we're going to get into portraits. So should we save that for a little bit later? Because I would like to at least talk about the one painting that's here with the glass.
Sure. So do you want me to stop the screen share for now?
Yeah, for now. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, you're back.
I'm going to show you this painting of glass, because everybody says, how do you paint glass? Well, again, it's just actually looking at the photograph and painting what you see. Now, the actual flower that was in this bowl, I did not like. So here's the flower that I put in the bowl. And you can mix and match as long as the direction of the light, which is, as you see down here, is coming kind of through there. So that's where my shadows would have to be. It would be really bad if I had my shadows in my flower going one direction and then my actual bowl in the other direction. And so here's another example. I'm working on this one, but look at how bad the actual flower is. I love that the shadow and all of the glass work is going to be beautiful. But on the other hand, the flower itself is not very pretty at all. So I'm going to take this and I'm making the bowl the way I want it. And then I'm going to take another flower and put in there. So this is how you can mix and match. I'm doing the same thing with this. I took some flower paint pictures, and I like the shadow, but I don't like this particular chrysanthemum. So I'm going to probably use this in this area here. So by mixing and matching, you can use different photographs. I like the shape of those flowers, but I like the light coming through this. So I'm probably going to use that. Again, my light source is coming from the right direction, so I can use those too. So whether you're doing a landscape or anything, make sure that the light source is coming in the right direction, okay? We can get into the portraits if you want, or I can go back and paint just a little bit more. How about I paint just a little bit more, and then we'll go into the rest of the slideshow. So,
Sure.
Okay, so here we have, again, I'm gonna go back into my reds and get some of this on the top going a little bit more, because I think these deeper tones are gonna be good to show you. And then I'm gonna do that center just a little bit more. And I may not finish this. Like I said, these take a little bit longer than what you think. There are students in my class that have painted maybe one flower and then they go, okay, I think I've done that. Now let's move on to landscapes or something a little bit easier. And the layering technique that I have, with every petal, I go back and look at it and judge again, is this correct as far as value or color? And I'm really a stickler on that. And some people want to stop at certain points, and I go, okay, if you feel like you've done enough, fine. But if you want to just make it a little bit better, we can do this or this or this. There are classes coming here too at the DuPage Art League. They're starting, I believe, on November 1st is the first class of the next session. And so if you sign up for any kind of class, you might want to call down here and get in the list, because there's only like 15 in a class. So we don't have large classes. And I think that's good, because then you can have a little bit more time with your instructors. So again, I'm mixing this deeper color with my reds. And then I come up and go right next to, I had just painted that all in white. And so I will make that white. I don't know if you're seeing this or not. That's right here that I'm working. And it goes down to about here. And for some people, they say, well, isn't that done? Aren't you done with that? I mean, I think that looks done. Well, maybe to some people it does look done, but I see so many little nuances that I really want to, enhance. And so I will keep going at it. All right, you see that little mistake because I had my finger in the white. So what do? You take a brush, put a little bit of mineral spirits on it, and you wipe it out. And that's what's so wonderful about oils, because you can actually wipe that off with a little bit of the mineral spirits. Now it might shine because it's wet, but it's gone, okay? So that's another thing I like too, that if you're making a mistake, that you can come back and actually correct it a little bit. Any more questions that anybody has?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
We're enjoying watching you put all these colors in.
Okay. Yeah, I think I really feel like I like teaching the best. And I don't know if you can tell, but we do have a class that it's kind of like a therapy class, because we get a lot done, but we laugh a lot and we have fun in that class. So, you know, anybody who is interested in trying to paint, I highly recommend that. It is something that gives you such pleasure. It really does. And especially for these, when we were stuck inside with COVID and stuff, I mean, it was wonderful that we had something that we could do, that we weren't just stuck inside, as they say, because you can always go to painting. And really, it's very creative. It gets your juices going. And it's just wonderful when you can either give a gift or do something that's so exciting and means a lot to somebody if you give them a gift. Yeah, there's a little bit there. Okay. So let's get that dark in there, just a touch more. I don't know if I had brown on that brush. We'll see.
Is that turpentine there?
That's mineral spirits.
Mineral spirits.
Yeah, turpentine smells so much, Sue, that they don't allow it at the league. And it does cause problems as far as it's not good for you. Not good at all. So you don't want to. In fact, that was one of the things that the Bob Ross thing, you know, how he took this huge brush and dipped it into mineral spirits and slapped it on the side of the, you know, and I think he actually died from some kind of thing that with the mineral spirits and the turpentine that got up in his lungs and that. And so, yeah, you really shouldn't use it. And a lot of people use this terpenoid, and it's expensive, but again, it's one of those things that if you feel you know, just like anything else, if you are somebody who says, I can't use turpentine, I really have to use something that's a little bit more friendly, green friendly, then go for the terpenoid. And they sell a bunch of things at the art stores that are probably better for you. I just, you know, like I said, I've been doing this for years and just haven't switched over to anything like that. But I think if you have sensitivity to any of these products, that go ahead and spend a little bit more money and get something that's not gonna give you health problems. Oops. I oops, because I got blue, too much blue. And you can tell right away. And if I want to use a touch of black, then I knock down that blue. Okay, so I'll put a little bit of brown in there, warm it up. You didn't catch that, did you, sir? Too fast, too blue.
Yeah.
The minute I put it up there, you see how that's too blue? I need to warm it up a little bit. So I'm gonna just add a touch of a little bit brown.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, did
Not
you get
quick
it?
enough. No,
Okay,
wait a minute.
did you get it? There's my puddle. It was too blue. So I had this brown that I made up for you. So I'm sticking a little bit of that brown in there. And that's the warmth that it's gonna get now instead of being quite so blue. And then I'm gonna actually just kind of come up into this red, the nice soft line. But do you see how the value, the dark, and it's almost the same depth as the red. And so that way I know I'm pretty close to being on key as far as the value. And I squint my eyes and those two are pretty close. Then I know I'm on the right track. Okay.
Since you were talking about solvents, someone is asking, how do you safely clean up your solvents?
I let them dry up. So in other words, when I get done, I'm gonna pour this into one of these jars. And you know, you eat Skippy peanut butter, right? So you save all your jars and then you pour the solvent into that. In a day, it goes to all that yucky paint goes to the bottom and the top part is almost clear. So now I take that, pour it off. Now the bottom has all that sediment in it. If I want to, I can just let that dry up. If I let it dry up, then I can toss it. It's not that hazardous because it's all dried. I keep reusing the mineral spirits over and over again. So I don't have that much. And then sometimes even if I just have a paper towel, like again, you shouldn't leave mineral spirits and stuff on your towels or rags or whatever you're using. Put it in a plastic bag for sure so that it doesn't cause hazardous. And then sometimes you if it's a little amount, go ahead and throw it out. If it's a big amount, I think there's places that you can take them to if you're really working with a lot of mineral spirits in that. And I normally don't use too much of the paper towels in that. I would be painting more and more and not getting quite as much of the washing out my brush because I'm going from color to color and petal to petal. So I'm washing it out a little bit more than I normally would be doing. But that's how I would suggest that you if it's dry, you can get rid of it right away. If it's not dry, then you can go to one of those centers where they actually tell you can take your mineral spirits in that.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to do a little bit more of the center, I think, just so you can get a feel of what's happening in the center. And there is a little bit of white with a hair of yellow in it. And that's what I'm going to put in right away, right through here, because that's my brightest bright. Touch more of the yellow. So that's going here. And then it's forming almost, it's like the pointed area. So that's here. Okay, now again, remember how I said, how do you make yellow darker? Well, it just so happens that I don't have the purple, but I do have a little bit of brown. I have a little bit of this and that, and I'm just gonna start sticking some colors in that I know it's gonna make it kind of the color I want by taking my yellow and maybe a touch of that little bit of a brownish cooler color. And I'm gonna put that next to it because that's where this particular little shape is coming from. And that's going here. Okay. And then we're gonna have a touch of this dark coming up that is gray, and it's a lighter gray because it's bouncing off the center, but it's the same value as this brown. So it's a color that's going in here. That's on the grayish. And this is coming around making a shadow. And that shadow might get darker, but I'm just gonna put it in so I know where it is now and I'll come back to it. Okay, and then these darker areas over here, there's a lot of them that have shapes that are the inside of the actual petals. What do you call those? I don't know. You know, everybody says you must have a gorgeous garden. Well, I don't, because I keep thinking you can either paint or plant, but you can't do both because they're too time consuming. So I rarely have many flowers that are right there at my disposal in my yard. So I'm driving along and I see a flower that's gorgeous in somebody's yard. And I will actually stop the car, ring their doorbell and say, oh, I'm a professional artist and your flowers are just gorgeous. Would you mind if I took a couple of photos of them? Because I would love to paint them. And before you know it, they're handing me the flower and they're just so enamored that I'm going to paint something. So I don't ever take the photos if it's on somebody's lawn and I have to step on the lawn. As long as I ring the bell and actually get their permission, then I can take some photographs of their flowers. Because I really, if you drive around, there's tons of actual flowers that are so gorgeous, but they're not in my backyard or my front yard. So I do take the photographs from that. I also go to church and a lot of times I will look at the flowers that are in the church and I'll grab a flower and go and take a photograph of it. Again, your cell phone is wonderful because you have it all the time with you. And then you can take those photographs and put the flower back and nobody knows the difference that you took that. So I get a lot of material from just plain going and asking, can I take a photograph of this? And most people are anxious to let you take some photographs of their flowers. And if I get flowers, what they normally ask for, the florist, is, can you give my wife or a bouquet of something that is very, very unusual? And there are sometimes I get bouquets that I have no idea what the flower even is. So that's where I kind of get into, oh, that's an unusual flower. What is it? And I don't know sometimes. So I'm looking up different flowers myself to say, what is it? If I like the shape, I like what it's doing, I'm getting a nice shadow, then I just simply take the picture of it and call it red flower or yellow flower or whatever, because I don't know the name of it. So just because I'm painting it doesn't mean I'm an expert of the flower. I really can sometimes not have the foggiest of what I've just painted. Okay, so now you can kind of see a little bit more of the inside here. Now I'm trying to get a little bit lighter values going into this. And again, detail work, I would come back and do a little bit more to get these edges a little bit cleaner. But I think at this point you are seeing kind of how I adjust these grays and go into the lights and darks, because this is all the light area in here, and this is gonna be all the dark area. If we wanna go back to some slides again, maybe I can talk about doing portraits and landscapes and stuff, because it's kind of all the same. So Barry, if we wanna do a little bit more, and then I'll wrap it up on how do I use varnish and where I put my screws and stuff like that, okay? So can we do a little bit more of the portrait type thing that I started?
Yes, so here's your next slide.
Okay, so this is my granddaughter when she was smaller. And I did not like her hairdo because it was pulled back so far. So I created a shape that I thought was better for her and didn't give those ears. And the hard part in this is the teeth. Because you really want to make teeth white, and teeth and eyeballs are not white. They're kind of flesh color. But this was kind of a neat thing that I thought actually captured her when she was little. So if I look at this, I'm thinking all the time of how do I put in the lights, the darks, and you can see right away that the shadows are important to me. So putting in those shadows almost sculpt this portrait, and that's what I kind of liked about it. Next.
Oh, let me click on it. There we go.
This was an actual workshop with Michael Latale, and Ellen and I went to this, and this gentleman was kind of like a Marine, and he sat there and we painted him from life. So after I painted this, I said, oh, maybe I better take a photograph of this, so if I get home, if there's something that I did wrong, I could at least check it out. So this was from life. So working from photographs is something that I do most of the time with my flowers. But as you saw, that one still life I did without a photograph. And flowers don't last that long. So if you're going to work on a flower, you better have a photograph of it. So this was a live person sitting for, I don't know, it was a day, wasn't it, Ellen? I don't remember now. It was an afternoon? Yeah, morning and afternoon. Okay, and I was pleased with it when I got done. But again, I was looking at the different planes and where the lights and the darks and the shadows were. So again, that's another idea of there is somebody in my class working on a portrait. So I don't specify flowers in oil painting. It is oil painting 101, and you can work in whatever subject matter you want. Next. Landscapes. So again, birch trees, color, whites. I don't think you can see it quite as much, but there's oranges and blues and browns and all sorts of different colors within these trees. But the texture and the different greens, how the cooler greens go back and the warmer greens are coming forward. And that's kind of a composition that I try to stress when I'm teaching the landscaping type in the class. Next. This is more fall colors. I don't know if anybody knows where Creekside is in Winfield, but it's a little tiny creek that runs through there. And again, it's a lot of brush strokes, a little freer because I'm standing there painting it, and you have to paint quickly when you are doing a plein air type thing because your shadows and everything changes. So when you're standing there, you have to lay in all of your values, again, the light to the darks and getting those shapes. So I think if you say, but I don't know, can you paint flowers? Can you paint horses? Can you paint so-and-so? If you know just the basics of oil painting, you can paint anything. Next. This is over at Northside Park. And again, there's a lot of different colors, different textures, sitting there looking at all of the different leaves turning, just starting to turn. It's just an example of taking a little tiny shed and making a composition out of it. Next. Okay, so now I got this photograph of this dog from California from my son's friend. And he said, could you do a painting? And I said, does it need to be on this bench? Because that's kind of a lot of lines. And they said, well, yeah, this is where he sat all the time. So if you can tell, I actually took a little bit of leeway with some of these bench things and tried to blur them down a little bit so that the first thing you saw wasn't the stripes of the actual bench. But again, this is working with color and textures, and you can paint anything. So that was one example. Next. That was another commission piece of a dog that again, my son in California said, Mom, could you paint this dog for this person? And so when I was in Florida, excuse me, visiting my sister, I actually did that. And they loved it. And it's just a nice little 11 by 14. Next. And now we get into spoons. This is what I've been doing at Christmas time, where I take teaspoons and people send me their photographs of dogs and I put them on the teaspoon. So not only is art something that you can do and create flat paintings, but you can use it wherever. And so that's what I wanted to interpret for today, is that painting is painting and you can paint anything, whether it's flowers, landscapes, animals. You can use art on spoons and create Christmas presents or whatever. Next. I think this is just little cats, and you hang those on the tree, and they were 3 different cats. And so is that the end of the slideshow, Barry? I think it is.
It is.
Okay. So I am going to now show you just a couple of things that I know I'm not going to finish that, obviously, but when somebody says, oh, I love that dewdrop, and how do you make it look like a dewdrop? And I thought, well, you know, sometimes it's interesting to just have, this is dry, but if I wanted to do a dewdrop, what would I do? So obviously it's a round type of a thing. Okay, so I would make a round. Then where's the shadow on this dewdrop? Well, if I feel like the shadow is more on this one side, I would say, yeah, the shadow is kind of coming here. So the shadow is going to be coming, here's our light sources coming this way. Well, then where does this come? And I'm going to put a touch of the same darker color over on this side. Okay. So now I've got this kind of a little bit of a darker color over here. I've got the shadow there. I'm going to come with a touch of light. You know, sometimes there's little tricks to things. And if you know the trick, you can make it work. That may be a little bit too bright. So the light source comes through this, and now it's coming over here. Okay. And the light is coming, but there's going to be a touch of a highlight over here. So once we get that highlight, that brush is huge to make that highlight. Once we get a nice little highlight coming, and there's a nice little highlight down here, and then there's a touch more dark. Now it's starting to look a little bit more like an actual dewdrop. Okay, so that's really an easy way to make it look like a dewdrop. Shadow under here, a little bit darker there, and the highlight. And now you've got a dewdrop. Okay, how do I make wrinkles in a flower? Well, again, you have lights and darks. So if we take a little bit of a darker feel here, and this is going to be like a rose, and it's got a ton of different veins going through. and you just simply keep working with your deeper tone on top of this. And sometimes they break into sections that have like little veins. So if you take and make your little veins first, and then you go back and you put a little bit of a highlight on top of where the light would be hitting, then you kind of get a sense of where these veins would be working in an actual flower. I hope that comes off a little bit because it's kind of subtle. I should have emphasized a little bit more, but you sometimes can work into some of these veins, and there's a ton of them in, especially some rose petals. They will just be lots and lots of these veins. So on one side is the highlight, on the other side is the actual shadow type thing. If we're going for like the petunias have these kind of like bumps in them. And so if you put your deeper tones first and get those in, and then come back with the lighter value and go right up into it, you can kind of make more of a bumpy type of a feel for your flower. So it's hard edge on the front side and a softer edge on the other. And it just kind of comes out with a lot of bumpy type things that are in this petunia. I think that's kind of a trick. But if you have soft edges and hard edges, it kind of works to get all those textures into that flower. So especially when you're working with the veins, there are sometimes that it takes hours to get these veins going in these petals, because if your petal is kind of like so, and you've got these tons of veins going, it can take a while for you to get all of them in the right direction, giving them the hint of the little bit of light on the one side, and then giving the darkness on the other side. So I hope that, you know, comes off a little bit from seeing what I'm doing here as far as making veins in the flowers, because a lot of the roses especially have a lot of veins in them. Blending is just a matter of taking those colors. If you have a petal and you need to come up to this one side, it's either going to have your light edge on one side, and then underneath it, it's going to have the deeper tone. So you can actually get your blending from going from that dark, okay, this is under this petal, and then just blend it out a little bit so that you don't have total darkness up next to it. But usually it's a little bit of that dark edge, and then you can make it kind of go out into blurriness. When I am trying to just use a little bit of warmth or coolness over a dry area, let's say that's too pink and now I want to warm it up just a little bit. If I take some of my warmer colors, like maybe a touch of yellow, and I take most of it off my brush, I can kind of warm that up. I don't know if you can see it, but your pink is still underneath, but you see how just putting a little bit of that warmth color over the top of it, I can warm that pink up. If I wanted to cool it down, I could take a little bit of my bluer pink and cool it down. And it's very dry brush. It's not a wet brush, because I'm actually taking my brush and taking the paint off of it so that it doesn't have much paint on it, but I can push it. And sometimes I tell people that if they want to soften some edges, to make a rounded type of a brush stroke so that it kind of blends one into the other. Those women who are putting on blush, this is kind of what I'm saying, take and do that rotating type of a feel, and you can get a nice blend going from the cool to the warm type thing. So I hope that helps you a little bit. I was trying to think what other things I could tell you about when you are painting, and there's just a couple of little tricks that I kind of feel like, oh, if you just knew that, you would get it. So I hope some of this has helped you in learning how to do a little bit of the edges and getting just a touch more of the feel of the flower edge, the petal, and anything that's going to come around and make it feel more like it is rounded, or if the edge is got a touch more light to it, you can kind of blend that in there. So that's why I kind of thought for sure one of these round dewdrops would be good. If it's a long dewdrop, same thing. Just start with, you know, a shape that goes down into. It doesn't have to be a total oval. It can kind of come from someplace and make a longer line. And it can be a small one. It can be a bigger one. Whatever you want to actually, you know, if this is your shape, and this comes down from the side of that petal that is orangey. And you just do the same thing. You just make the top a little bit darker and the bottom a little bit lighter. And then all of a sudden you have more or less a dewdrop type thing coming through here. And then your highlight can be a little bit more of a straight type thing coming up in that section. So these are little things that you learn how to do, obviously. And I'm hoping that maybe by painting and watching this, that you'll try something, because I really think that oil paints are so forgiving. They're just really a neat thing that you can use and have fun with. And I think you'll enjoy painting for sure. I don't know if I can talk all the way up to the end of this thing. All right.
Well, we actually have
Oh.
maybe one or two questions. I'm going to read
Sure.
this to make sure I get it absolutely right. Someone asks, when you're doing a picture that needs a light background, as opposed to the dark background that you typically have for your flowers, do you start with a dark background and paint lighter on top, or start light and add the dark accents as needed?
If the background is white, like the one painting I had, the mum with the shadow, I would just fill in the painting itself and then put up the lighter background on it, because there's no, why put a dark and then put a light? So if you're working with the dark flower, like that mum is maroon, I would actually just paint that in. And then whatever that background, maybe it was a cream color, maybe there's a light blue sky, maybe there's something really pale. So then there's no reason why you have to have a dark, not at all. So it's only when I'm doing a lighter flower that I put that dark background. Couple other things, I use goop to clean my brushes sometimes, put it in my hand, it's a degreaser. So you put it in your hand, you take your brush, you wash it out, and that's what I've been using. As far as varnishes, it's a retouch varnish that I put on. A retouch varnish can be put on a painting after it is dry to touch, and it kind of pulls up the paint so it looks like it's wet. You have to be careful, it's toxic again, you know, go outside. But you can at least use this for the varnishing it. Retouch varnish. When you are hanging the painting, I simply take the screw eyes and I put them on the inside of the wood, so that when my wire goes across, the thing that hits the wall is the actual painting. It doesn't stand out because I've got screw eyes here. So I put my screw eyes on the inside of the wood, and then that lays it flat up against the actual wall. So those are just little hints of how you might want to frame these things. I don't frame them at all. If you know somebody that doesn't want them framed, fine, then you can paint around the edges. And a lot of times my petals will go around the edges. If you know that they want to frame them, it's very hard to frame these thicker paintings. The ones that are, you know, like 1.5 inches, they can be framed with what they call a what is it called, with it's recessed inside, a floater frame. Those are really harder to frame. So I believe that my flowers stand on their own so that I really don't frame any of them. And if somebody really wants them framed, they're gonna have to take that into their own hands because I don't frame them. So that's probably the only other things that I wanted to get across. Oh, and then if you do paint, save your pizza boxes or anything, because when you're transporting paintings, if you just want to just slip it in there, now it's protected and your car is protected. So, always take a box with you when you're painting, and even when you're storing them. I'm working on 12 paintings right now, so it's kind of like they're stacked. And at least if you have a pizza box or a shirt box or something, you can transport them without getting in trouble. The other trick is when I'm working on a flower, boy, I need to have that flower so I can keep looking at it. So I usually take the flower and put it in between here so that my picture of the flower is always with the painting. So that when I pick this up, I know that I am going to be able to have that photograph with that. Okay. I don't know anything else that I can at this time. I'm trying. We got 5 minutes left. Any other questions?
Yeah, so many great tips, Marge. Thank you. One person is asking about the shade of phthalo blue that you use. Whether it's
Well, phthalo blue is just one color. The only thing I will say is that every single brand of paint, a phthalo blue can be a little bit different from brand to brand. But to me, it's turquoise. So if you have a turquoise on your palette, that's a lighter version of phthalo blue. So if you only wanted to invest in one color, get the darker one, because you can always add white to it and make it cerulean, but you can't make cerulean darker easily. Okay, does that answer the question, I hope?
I believe so. Thank you.
Okay.
Someone else is asking, do you keep a sketchbook?
No, I do not. Because sketchbook to me is for landscapes and that. And if I'm doing the flowers, I'm composing that composition when I'm taking the photograph. So when I'm looking at that flower, I am creating that composition of where the shadows are going to go. And so to me, I don't have to sketch anything out because I've already got it in my head. If I want to move a petal over because it's awkward, I can do that. So I don't paint some of the flowers. I either add something to it or I take something out, or if there's too many petals in one section and not enough here, I can add or take out too. So it's not like I'm totally copying something. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Right. All right. Well, thank you so much. There's lots of people commenting just how helpful this has been, and how wonderful your instruction is, and how beautiful the things are that you've shown us. So thank you so much. We certainly want to express our appreciation to Marge Hall and the DuPage Art League for generously giving your time and effort to provide this presentation. I will provide several contact links in an email later tonight. If you are watching the recording of this presentation, you may receive those resource links by emailing me at ce@wheatonlibrary.org. That's CE for community engagement at wheatonlibrary.org. The recording of this program will be available within about a week on the library's YouTube page. So with that, we thank you again, and we'll say take care, everybody, stay healthy, and good night. Thanks so much.